Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to today's virtual edition of our Matric revision session this afternoon. We welcome you to like and share this particular feature today in terms of our session online, YouTube and Facebook. That's the Voice of the Cape. Our guest today is Mrs. Nishaat Dastagir. She is an educator at the Darul Arqam School teaching home language, English home language. Alhamdulillah. And today we will be focusing on paper two literature, and I know that many of our students, they are busy with assessments and mock exams, etc. So I think this is very vital, Mrs. Dastagir.
Okay. Um, yes, it is. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Juanita. And shukran for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of this wonderful show. It's been a while, I think. So it's good to
Yes,
be
we
back.
missed you. So
So
I'll now
today
hand
is,
over. Yes, I'll hand over to you to proceed. Bismillah.
okay, shukran. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, all the viewers out there. Welcome back. Today's session, so we concluded, I think 2 weeks ago, we concluded with paper one. This week, we will be focusing on our English home language paper two, which is our literature paper. Okay, so this week we'll only be focusing on one section of the paper, and then we'll do it again over about 2 or 3 weeks, inshallah. Okay, without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so the paper two, which is our literature paper, consists of three sections. Section A is our poetry, which is equivalent to 30 marks, and our section B, which is our novel, and that is 25 marks, and that will be your school will choose a novel for you based on the novels that is available through the WCED. Then we'll have our section C, which is drama, and that is also 25 marks, and that is also the school's preference. Okay, so what to expect in section A? Poetry. Okay, so poetry, you will be required to answer three poems in this section. Okay, two poems are from the prescribed list that you have covered during lesson times during the year. You choose from the list of four that will appear in the exam paper. So you will have four prescribed poems in the paper. You only choose the two that you are most comfortable with. Choose the two that you are most comfortable and familiar with. Okay, there are 12 prescribed poems that you should have covered during the year, and I'm going to give you the names of them so you can double check also which ones you have and which ones you don't. So the list of prescribed poems. Okay, so by now you should have covered all of them, or you're just around about finishing them off. Um, we have the list of 12, which is Remember. We have the Zulu Girl, Funeral Blues, An African Elegy, An African Thunderstorm, Moto Kimoto, Kababato Babang, A Hard Frost, Vultures, Felix Randall, The Garden of Love, Somewhere I've Never Traveled, and The First Day After the War. Okay, so those are your 12 prescribed poems for this term, for this year. Um, there is an annotated little booklet that is available to teachers and that's also available to learners. If you don't have it yet, you can put a request in with your teacher and maybe your principal, and maybe they will give you those annotated poems for you to study. Okay, so section A is your prescribed poetry. The section is 10 times 2. So I'm sorry, oh, I'm so sorry that's bad. I'm spacing on top there. So question 1 will always be a poetry essay. Okay, and the focus of today's lesson will be the poetry essay first. So question 1 is always a poetry essay. The poetry essay's word count is 250 to 300 words, and that will always be like that. It won't change. For question 1, section A, always the poetry essay, 250 to 300 words, always. Okay, the type of question to expect, right? And the example I'm using, we will remember, I said in the very beginning, we'll be focusing on 2018 and 2021's exam papers. So for this, the purpose of this exercise, we'll be taking a question and a poetry essay question from the NSC exam for November 2021. So, the type of question to expect. So, in the Garden of Love, the speaker is critical of the role the church plays in the lives of people. That is a statement. Okay? Let me just, I don't know if I can highlight it. Oh, shit, wrong. Okay, so sorry. The speaker is critical of the role the church plays in the lives of people, right? That is a statement. Okay, that's something that the the, the writer is just putting out there. So, with close reference to diction, imagery, and tone, okay, you need to critically discuss the validity of this statement, and that is your question. So, do you all remember what the diction is? The diction is the words that's being used, okay? The diction and in the imagery we discover through the similes, the metaphors, etc., and in the tone, right, is the writer's feelings, right, and attitudes towards a certain um, idea or thing that he's feeling at the moment. So critically discuss the validity. So is this a valid statement? Okay. Your response should take the form of a well-constructed essay of 250 to 300 words. That's approximately one page, okay? And that question is equal to 10 marks. So, what is a poetry essay? So, a lot of learners sort of avoid this question because they're a bit scared. I don't know why, but I think for me personally, it's also the quickest way to get 10 marks. What is a poetry essay? So, the poetry essay is a critical essay wherein you discuss the issues raised in the question by examining the content of the poem and the poetic devices in the poem. So these are things you should have been covering since grade 10 already. Because now in the NEC, they'll just be tested on whether you know diction, whether you know what poetic devices are, etc., etc. Remember, the type of essay is not a paraphrase. So in other words, you're not just going to take the words from the poem and just retell the story in a different language, right? You are actually going to critically analyze the poem. You're going to look at the sound devices or the poetic devices. You're going to look at the similes, the metaphors, etc., etc., and you're going to see what those words mean in the context of that poem. Okay, what mood it creates, etc., etc. The type of essay is not a paraphrase, remember that. They don't take kindly or they don't mark kindly to paraphrasing of the poetry essay. So, what are poetic devices and literary devices? Refer to the final slide and we'll go there when we are done. Okay. So, what to look at when you're analyzing the poem for the poetry essay? You need to look at the figures of speech. You need to pay attention to the imagery. So, how are images created, right? And what words are being used to create that image in your mind? Then also the diction, the choice of words, and that the poet uses. So what type of words are the poet using? Is it figurative? Is it literal, etc., etc.? And then you also look for, is there tone? Is there rhythm? And all of that. Okay. So word choice is basically your diction. So the imagery and sound devices, right? So this is what the type of questions you need to be asking yourself. Is the poet's language figurative or literal? Okay. What does the poet choose? Why does the poet choose certain words? And what effect do those words have on the mood of the poem? And then describing words. So look at the alliteration, the onomatopoeia, the metaphors, and the similes. And then also the vivid language. And then your word choice again, assonance, alliteration, and onomatopoeia. Then your tone and attitude, okay? Words that give the feeling and emotion that the poet wants to express, how the poet feels. Okay, so that's the tone. Okay, then you'll pick up a certain attitude in the tone of voice. Remember how your mother always tells you, Which words have the poet used to create a certain mood or feeling? Remember similes, metaphors, look at all of those. What does the tone change in the poem? Okay, and how does it change? Um, is there a change in tone later on in the poem? I think it's remember it has that change in tone in tone and mood. Then we have your word choice, the connotations, the emotions that it's attached to certain words, the denotations, that's the actual meanings of words. I'm sorry, I made a typo there. There's a typo there. So denotation, actual meanings of words. Okay, and then you ask yourself, why does the writer use the tone or the feeling in this poem? Okay, let's next one is just style, structure, and form. Okay, what type of poem is this? Right? How many stanzas does the poem consist of? Is there a rhyme? Can you identify the rhyme scheme? Is there an unusual use of punctuation marks or an absence thereof? Why does the writer use these devices or forms? What is the writer? That all is all got to do with the message and the theme. So then why is this devices being used? What is the writer trying to bring across? Okay, then we have the mood. Remember, the mood is how the reader feels when he is done reading or during reading of the poetry. So the mood, the interpretation, the theme of the message. What is the poet trying to say? Okay, what type of message is the poet trying to get across? How does the poet want you to feel? Who or what is the poem for? Okay, that's why it's so important that you have an understanding of the poem and the poet. And that's why you need to always have an understanding of that, so you can say who or what is the poem, so you can have a better understanding of the context of the poem. Okay. Then you also have to understand: is it a historical event? Um, right? Is it an important event in the life of the poet? And when I think of this, I always think about Cecil Day Lewis's "Walking Away." And then when I think about is it a historical event, I think about Vultures, the poem Vultures, and there's reference there to the Belsen camp, the Belsen Nazi camp. So you need to understand that context, right? So who is the narrator? Think about who the narrator is, where the narrator comes from. Okay, is it the poet himself, or is it somebody else telling the story of somebody else, etc., etc.? Like, is it first person, second person, or third person? What does the poem mean to you? Okay, so how does a poem make you feel after you've read it? Okay, how do you feel during and after reading the poem? And we covered that already. Can you relate to any of the events or feelings being expressed in the poem? What themes can you identify in the poem? Okay, remember themes, you have your minor themes, you have your major themes, and the themes is something that is either constant throughout a piece of literature work, and then we have the minor themes that is current just for a little while and then sort of dies out. Okay, so what themes do you pick up or can you identify when you are reading the poem? Okay, how to approach this type of essay? How do we approach this type of essay? You need to read the poem, okay, and highlight any diction. Or diction is simply referred to the words that are being used. Then you need to pay attention to the words' hidden purpose or meaning. Remember, poets, they have poetic licenses and they can sort of play around with grammar. They can play around with with words, So it's important for you to have a good understanding of the language. Then you highlight any imagery. Okay, so the imagery will be given in through the metaphors, the similes, the personification, the alliteration, the assonance, etc. Then identify the tone. What is really amazing is that now, at this point in time, you don't need to go and search for all that time because the department was really great. And we have people that work extremely hard to make sure that we have the best resources that's available to you. So they've sort of put on their website a beautiful poem put together the poetry anthology. And in that anthology, we have the entire annotated poems for you. So the tone is there, the mood is there, the structure and form, they have a glossary. So all you basically need to do now is understand that poem because it's already annotated for you. So identify the tones. Is it contemplative? Is it frustrated? Frustration? Is the writer sad, or is he angry, or is he enraged, or how exactly is the writer feeling or the poet feeling? And then, how does the word choice make you feel? The mood. Okay. How does the writer want the reader to feel and understand? And what does the writer want the reader to understand after reading the poem? Okay. Go. This is the basic layout or structure of the essay. So you're going to have an introduction, right? Write 2 or 3 sentences on the issues raised in the question. Link these issues to an overview of the poem. Okay, remember? Link these issues to an overview of the poem. And in the example, I'll show you how to do it. So then we have our body, right? This is the in the body of the poem. I always advise my learners to try and do one paragraph, right, per thing that they ask. So if you're going to write about tone, you only use one paragraph and you only write about tone. If they're asking you about structural form, you use one paragraph and you speak only about structure and form, and the next paragraph you'll speak about the diction. The next paragraph will speak about the mood or the images, etc. So then you'll have a paragraph for each thing that you need to discuss. This is the analysis of the poem. Form the perspective of the issues raised in the question. So this is where you use or refer to the diction, tone, and imagery to show how the poet's message is being conveyed. Okay, this part is more than one paragraph. Okay, that's why I advise them. Introduction, body consists of 2 to 3 paragraphs, and then obviously your conclusion. You must have paragraphs in your essay. It's important that you do. You can't have one entire long essay. Okay, just one paragraph that has everything in. Your poetry essay needs to be divided into paragraphs. Then the concluding paragraph or conclusion. This paragraph could be 2 or 3 sentences long. Okay, you are summarizing your analysis, so there's no new information in the conclusion. It is important to emphasize in the conclusion that you have answered the essay question. Links to follow to better understand poetic devices, and you may look at this on your own leisure. But it's beautiful YouTube videos that shows us the poetic devices and how it's used and how to use it and what meanings and what tone and all of that. So have a look at it on your own time, at your own leisure, and you'll have a better understanding of what the poetic devices are meant to do. So here's the answer to the example question in slide 5. You're going to start with a brief introduction. Your body should consist of 3 short paragraphs. You're looking at diction, you're looking at imagery, and you're looking at the tone. Okay, and then you're also going to have a brief conclusion summarizing what you said in the essay and also linking it to the introduction. Okay, so an example of an introduction. So the poem describes the poet's return to a garden of love in which he used to play. This could be an actual or mental or emotional state of mind. However, we interpret it. The way the poet describes the garden and the way he describes the chapel that has replaced it are very different and clearly show his anger and disapproval of the Christian church of his time. So this, you'll see at the end how this statement links to the conclusion. Then we have our body, and which is paragraph 1. Okay, body, paragraph 1 of the body. So here we're discussing the diction. Okay, so the garden of love indicates that there is happiness, love, and pleasure. Statement, point. Okay, remember, peel method is very important in this paper. Point, evidence, explanation, link, diction, garden of love indicates that there is happiness, love, and pleasure. That's a statement, right? The words are synonymous with beauty, greenery, a place to enjoy. Chapel is a countable noun, meaning it is part of the church which has its own altar and is used for a private prayer. Evidence. This is also a statement, sorry, it's a statement. This could mean that the chapel used as a proper noun could show us the selfishness of the institution of the church. So that's point, and there we have our evidence. It also indicates that this place is a space for a select few. Point, evidence, explanation. The gates of this chapel were shut, indicates the exclusivity of the institution of the church. It could also indicate that the entry for prayer times are dictated to the people, and it is not a heaven for everyone to pray when they want or when they need arises. So in other words, point, evidence again, evidence, point, and then we have our explanation. The word thou shalt not is a warning for the followers of religion and can also reiterate the idea of dictatorship. Let's carry on. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with the PowerPoints this afternoon. So then we have paragraph 2 of the body, and in this paragraph we will be discussing the imagery. Okay, so the poem is filled with the garden is filled with graves. Once we there were sweet flowers, now the grounds are filled with graves. This could indicate that religion could stifle or even kill anything or everything beautiful. So the sweet flowers could also show the reader that sweetness, brightness, and the blossoming of love and happiness, and this has now been taken away from by the image of graves and tombstones. The death of love and youthfulness, the image of the priests in their black gowns walking their rounds, has the image of death reapers collecting souls of gods, maintaining strict order in their religion. Also looks like something that's from Doomsday, binding with briars, my joys and desires. So do you all understand that image? Right? Briars is little, it's almost like thorn-like flowers. Okay. My joys and desires gives an image of torture, a slow, painful method of torture. It can also act as a deterrent. This indicates that the poet believes that the church and its teachings can make everything that you once enjoyed and loved and kill it and the idea of everything that brings pleasure. So, point, very important, evidence, right? The evidence in this instance will be little quotes, and then you need to substantiate or explain those quotes, and then you need to link it right back to the question or your then, paragraph 3, which is our paragraph 3 of our body, and in this paragraph, we will discuss the tone. Okay, so the tone, the green grass, contrasts with the black gown of the priest. What is growing and what is dead? Right? The natural growing flowers contrast with graves and tombstones, which are man made. Playing freely is synonymous with softness or gentleness, and the priests walking their rounds in prescribed routes are seen as rigid and callous. So, what is rigid? Rigid is very stiff and boring, right? Morbid almost. And then we have callous, which is hard and crusty. So flowers are gentle to the touch, whereas the briars are something that inflicts pain when it is touched. The tone of the poem ultimately contrasts light and dark, freedom and control. William Blake tries to show that the institution of religion and the church is dark and controlling. Okay, so again, point, evidence, explanation. Then we have the example of the conclusion. Blake uses several powerful images to represent very different things. The chapel and graves represent a prison like church locked and forbidding, which asserts its power over the individual and sucks all the joy from their lives. death and darkness are all the church can offer. So now you see that how that I highlighted it in red, and that links back to our to our introduction. Mark for that. The garden or green represent an innocent Eden-like state in which people can enjoy the beauty of nature, their own instinctive natures, and the loveliness of the natural world. So that again, you'll see that your conclusion and your introduction should link. Okay, and in your introduction, in your conclusion, Mark, there is no new evidence. Right? So you're just substantiating or concluding or summarizing everything that you have said in the essay already. Next one. Do not forget your planning. Okay? You receive, you are awarded marks for planning effectively. Your planning needs to appear before your final piece. Okay, so some points to note. The poetry essay is not compulsory in section A from the prescribed list of poems, but the poetry essay will be from your prescribed list of poems. Okay, you may choose any two of the prescribed poems you have been taught in class. Read all the instructions carefully before answering any of the questions in this section. If a student attempts all the poems, only the first two poems will be marked. So it's important for you to remember that. Don't waste your time. Okay, this paper is extremely lengthy. Okay, and we're sitting with the kids that comes from COVID era, so they sort of. So my best advice for you is do not waste time. If a student attempts all the poems, don't attempt all the poems. Read all the instructions carefully. Stick to what you know. Then, some of the common errors when answering the poetry essay. So this is from the Marcus report, right? And some common errors when answering poetry essay that they have picked up is that learners resort to simply paraphrasing or lifting or just rewriting from the poem instead of critically engaging with the content of the poem and the question. So, in other words, in order to answer the question effectively, you need to engage with the content of the poem. You need to know, understand the diction. You need to understand tone. You need to understand the poetic devices and all of that, etc., etc. So, learners provide examples of the diction, the tone, and the imagery from the poem, but are not always able to explain how these aspects are used to convey the speaker's criticism. Right? So, in other words, you need to apply the Peel method. So, point, what are you saying? Evidence, where in the text can it be found? Example, evidence, explain. Okay, explain what, how that is being, or how the message is being brought across. In most cases, no reference is made to tone. Why is no reference made to tone? Because learners don't understand that the tone, right, is the writer's feelings or understanding of certain things. So he will write or he'll use diction, the words, in a certain way to bring across his feelings. But how, and that diction and the tone, the diction, and then how makes the reader feel. Okay, so the tone, remember, tone, how is tone identified? It is identified through the use of words. It's used, look at the metaphors, look at the imagery, etc., etc. I was reading Vultures today, and when Vulture starts, it speaks about this grey drizzle, harbingers, and you have this really dark, grey, miserable setting, So the tone itself and is miserable, it's grim. And then we as the reader, when we read it, right, our mood is sort of, one of my learners said she's a little bit more interested. Okay, so there'll be different moods or different readers will react differently to certain poems. So she was more interested when I was saying, nah, that poem actually makes me feel a little bit morbid, because it starts off as dry and drizzling and cold and dreary. Okay. Then, learners might not understand the context of a poem, which could negatively affect the ability to respond appropriately. So, that's why it's important for you to understand the context of the poem. You need to have a little bit of background knowledge of the poet, right? And what was happening at that point in time. Right. So, and one of my favorite poems to look back is a poem by Cecil Day Lewis, which is called "Walking Away." And this poem, Cecil Day Lewis wrote for his son, right, when his son grew up and had to start going out on his own. So, when you understand the context of the poem, automatically you have a better you are able to respond more appropriately to the questions that are being posed. Okay, so learners present their personal views and beliefs instead of analyzing the poem. Guys, I can't emphasize this enough. Um, yes, your opinions are important to a certain extent. However, if your opinions are not substantiated or explained, and it's not and it bears no reference to what the question is asking, it is quite irrelevant. So I need you to know this, and that's why I always emphasize with my own learners to please follow the peel method. Point. What are you saying? Evidence. Um, example, um, explain, and link back to the question. This way, right? And if you do it by putting one topic, one using one paragraph per topic, you are less likely to be sidetracked, or you are less likely to go off, or you are less likely to give your own beliefs and personal views. We're not really interested in that. It doesn't pay any weight to the context of the poem, and it doesn't pay any context to the thing. It's quite irrelevant, and we are not going to answer it. Okay, we'll sort of overlook it. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of my my point. I'm not sure. It's not going anywhere else. Okay. Next week, what we will do is we'll have a look at the how to approach the unseen poem, and then we will also be looking at some questions that they could pose in the register, in the question paper. Remember that we are writing our mock exams on the 6th of September, and it's important for us to understand as much as we can. I also want to say that if anyone is interested, they could maybe give me a call, and I can maybe just email them a soft copy of the annotated poetry list. And then also there's a also another lovely resource that you could actually use to do the poetry essay, which is called the last push notes. Okay, so that's like using the four square method to analyze and to complete the poetry essay. Hmm? Okay. And I think that's a wrap for today. I think I'm well within my time today, alhamdulillah.
Spot
Okay.
on, spot on, spot
Okay.
on. Yes. So, shukran once again for joining us today. And then also share your email address. So if anyone would like to email you,
Okay. Do you need me? I don't know if I can type it out, but
we'll
anyway.
add it in the description. Let's just add it in the description. I'll add it onto the description a little later. You can also
Okay.
email me, Conita at vocfm.co.za, and then I'll then get that details through to you. So, shukran once again. May you have a wonderful day.
What?
And do like and share. I see that we've got quite a few people who have tuned into the session. Please do share and like with whoever can benefit, inshallah. From myself and
Um,
my guest today.
okay. Shukran,
Alhamdulillah.
Anita. Afwan for having me.
Walaikum
It's a pleasure
warahmatullahi.
being here. Wa alaikum
Alhamdulillah.
salam wa
Afwan.
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.